If you struggled on a daily basis with what we refer to in psychology as hypervigilance, maybe you're chronically worried or waiting for the shoe to drop, you're ruminating about, oh, I should have said this or that, you're tracking your partner for any sign of disconnection or abandonment, then this video is for you. I want to really help you in this video start to do some things that are based in neuroscience of how you can start to unwind hypervigilance. Hi, my name is John Hawkins Jr. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, certified trauma specialist, and co-founder of Hawkins Counseling Center. Working with trauma so much as I do, one of the things I find in probably 80–90% of my clients is they struggle with these kind of things. And one of the things I want to explain about hypervigilance, as distressing as it may be, was that at one point it was very adaptive. The development of it usually stems, it could stem in adult life, but a lot of times it's in earlier life, adolescence, childhood, where maybe I had, to track the mood of an abusive parent or an addicted parent. So like I would listen to how their car pulled up or what, their cadence was as they walked in the house, just any sign that they were going to get explosive or abusive, then I could take evasive action, maybe like head out to the backyard or hide or be quiet. Or maybe you have a spouse who struggled with addiction. And so I'm reading their moods, it's like, are they stressed out? Are they shut down? Any signs that a relapse is coming? Or maybe you've been a veteran, a first responder, where there was these legitimate threats, for your safety, whether it's a burning building, whether it's, opposing soldiers. And so being vigilant was very adaptive. And because of what happens in trauma, what we call disassociation, where I have to split off energy I can't regulate, now it's frozen in my body, my nervous system, and what's called implicit memory. And so the part of me that went through those experiences is still kind of stuck in those moments. And that's why it's so hard to turn off hypervigilant, because it was good to be vigilant. In the case of the child who got beat, my hypervigilant, my reading my parents' moods got me less beat, or maybe it saved my life as a fireman or a soldier. And so a lot of times people will have shame about their hypervigilance or some of the impact it has, their behaviors, their reactions, like if they get abandonment triggered, this kind of stuff. But I want you to realize it was adaptive. And maybe friends and family, try their best to support you or say things like, everything's gonna be fine, or worry doesn't have any value. And you say, yes, I know all these things, you might as well just tell an alcoholic not to drink. Like that would be an epiphany that would just solve my hypervigilance. And then what happens with hypervigilance is you get into a feedback loop where anxiety causes me to track my environment for threats, and then those threats give me more anxiety, which creates more hypervigilance, more threat detection, and you just get stuck in this chronic loop that you're desperate to get out of. Or maybe to relieve yourself, there could be binge eating, alcohol, cannabis, prescription drugs to lower my hypervigilance, things like the benzodiazepines, Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, these kind of things. And then people just get a prescription and their lifelong treatment plan is just keep taking these drugs. But I want to tell you, all my clients who stick with it overcome hypervigilance, they get out of chronic anxiety. There is absolutely zero reason anyone on planet Earth should have to live with chronic anxiety. Every bit of it is resolvable once you get to the origins of what's causing it. And a bulk of it for me and my clients, I would say 80–90%, even though we look at some other holistic things, is parts of them that are frozen in trauma time that create this sympathetic nervous system activation where they're just stuck in this chronic fight or flight state. And like I said, it's just they're frozen in that moment. Now the brain also can only take in so much data at a time. So then there's also in hypervigilance what we call attentional bias. So research shows us that you have about 11 million bits of information a second coming at you. And at max, the same studies would tell us that you can only pick out about 126 of those 11 million. So you're excluding almost everything that's coming at you from a sensory level and only grabbing like a speck of what's happening. And so when you're in hypervigilance and trauma, you're picking things out of that 126 that are potential threat cues, which then create, like I said, more anxiety, more hypervigilance. That perception is a creative process. An example might be, I've got some attachment trauma from abandonment. So I'm in a relationship now and I'm constantly tracking my partner's moods. Are they upset with me? I'm needing, recurrent reassurance from them, which after a while starts to get, a negative reaction from them. Like I can't be, they maybe don't believe in me. I've done everything I can to create safety and reassurance, and maybe that brings up stuff for them. And you get caught in these conflict cycles as a couple, So then I just see what we refer to as false positives sometimes. So an example I've used probably in other videos and thousands of clients is I'm a runner, and one day I'm running down the street, I see this thing out of the corner of my eye, I jump, thought it was a snake, it was a stick. Every time my brain is gonna tell me snake, which is good for snakes, but bad for relationships. So if my partner has just woke up a little fatigued, or they're agitated about a work stressor or something, and I'm just looking at them, what's wrong? Are they upset with me? Are they upset with me? And you just get caught in this chronic worry. And maybe they're stressed and they feel your energy and they want to get away from that because they're dysregulated already. And I'm like, see, I knew something was wrong. I knew they're going to abandon me. And so that's how, again, it just keeps reinforcing itself in this loop that you just can't get out of. The next thing I want to talk about is the brain's bias towards negativity. The first priority for every human being is survive, don't get killed. So the brain evolved to really look for threats because that's much more adaptive than smelling the flowers, but leads to a lot of hypervigilance and anxiety at times. And so clients will come in shaming themselves oftentimes, or people in their life maybe have shamed them that they're negative, or why do you always have to be so cynical? And I'm here to tell you that you're not, like your core nature of who you are is not negative and cynical, but you've got parts of you stuck up in this threat response and survival time. And so one of the first filters we have is the brain's threat detector called the amygdala. The word just means almond in Latin because it looks like an almond. But it is tracking the environment constantly, looking for threats. And then if it perceives one, it fires off, stress responses like our fight or flight system, our freeze state, or a need to go, reach for connection or attachment, which is the most evolved system we have. But it goes through that first. It's the brain's quick filter. What happens a lot of times is when you're just in this chronic hypervigilant state, it doesn't get to go through the reassessment. So we call it the low road, the amygdala, and then the high road of more evolved parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex and some of the associated regions that could see that and take a second look at it. So let's say in the relational example I gave, maybe my quick immediate reaction is my partner's upset with me. And if I stop and think through, reflect for a second, maybe I'm seeing it differently. I'm looking at them again. Maybe they just seem like they're tired. Or I can check in and say, is everything okay? Or I don't just assume it's not, or just shut down and stay in this chronic anxiety. So when the amygdala is so kindled, where it's just like a fire burning, ready to go higher, then we skip the reassessment and just action takes place and ensues. So then the research shows us, a big study they did at the University of California, Berkeley, that the amygdala is tracking about 9 negative things, or notices 9 negative things to every 1 positive thing. So even in the average person, that's the case. But if you're stuck in chronic hypervigilance, I haven't seen a ton of studies on this, but my assumption would be that's got to be 2 or 3 times higher, at least. And so in my experience working with trauma clients is that they are noticing, in some cases, almost exclusive threats and negativity. It's hard to notice anything positive. I'll be working with a couple where one or both of them have trauma, and they're asking for this thing, and it happens right in front of them, and I ask them, what was it like to finally receive that? And they're like, well, they never do that. They didn't even visually see, and I say compassionately, did you see what you want just happened right in front of you? Did you see it? And they'll say, no, I had no idea. I didn't even visually see him or her say that. And as a result of that, then again, being stuck in this hypervigilance is you miss out on so much, which just adds to more emotional pain, which creates more hypervigilance. We have what's called action systems that some psychologists have studied that orient our behavior, our focus, attention. So we have attachment, defense, caretaking, sexuality, play, exploration, a lot energy regulation. So an example would be if I'm sitting down and I'm writing an article for our center and I'm tired or I'm hungry, more and more my focus leaves the article and starts going to I'm starving, I need nutrition, and so that orients all that. Defense will supersede everything. And so no matter how hungry I am, no matter what I was doing before, if there's a threat, that system will neurologically take over and then everything else gets shut down to some degree. And so when you're chronically in that, where I'm just like looking for threats, self-protection, you stay so high up in what's called a beta wave state that you can't get calm enough to access like your highest creativity in an alpha state, deep connection with others, because again, maybe I fear rejection, abandonment, loss, attack, assault, whatever that is. And so then the loss of all these things just add to the emotional pain that you get stuck in. So now I want to transition to some good news now that you got all that. But I hope out of that you at least see that this isn't because I'm a negative person, there's some personality disorder that I have, or I'm flawed in some way. It's that I'm carrying some kind of pain or trauma, and I'm just stuck in that response neurologically, and I just can't get out of it because it keeps reinforcing itself. So there is a couple psychologists that I want to reference right now. One is what they call like a high performance coach, Michael Gervais, that works with premier elite athletes, CEOs, really high performing people. And he says in terms of our thinking, right, which is influenced by this hypervigilance, there's thoughts that expand or thoughts that constrict. And you can see this so much in when I track, one of the things I'm doing, and I don't analyze people, I observe and I share with them immediately everything I'm observing, is that the body often tells the story. So somebody walks in, you can tell they're stuck in hypervigilance or negative thinking because their body exhibits it. Maybe they're either very tense or they're turned inward, they're not expanded, where somebody has positive energy and thoughts and emotions, they're usually coming in, their body's expanded, the way they move is outward rather than inward and constricted. The next psychologist I want to reference is University of North Carolina professor Barbara Fredrickson. She did a big research study where she identified what's called the positivity scale. So her research showed that you need 3 positive thoughts to counteract the impact of 1 negative thought. Now, I know that everything I just shared with you, you might be thinking, how in God's name is that possible when my amygdala is seeing 9 negative things to every 1 positive thing? And I'm supposed to come up with 3 positive thoughts to every 1 negative thought? And then here's another factor, because some of you have maybe tried positive thinking or affirmations or all these kind of things and have not been successful. And here's one of the reasons is you can't BS your brain. You know you. And so I might come up with like, okay, I just got to change my thinking. And you see that a lot in personal development and things. And again, these are good things. I'm not saying there's not any value, but it's not going to create neuroplasticity, which is always the goal. We got to rewire your brain and your nervous system for real change to take place. And so, somebody might say, this time next year, I'm going to have a $10 million company, or I'm going to, have 3 houses when right now they're living in a studio apartment and they're 20 grand in credit card debt. Your brain is just going to look at you and be like, what are you talking about? So in terms of that, things need to be believable. And without going too far down this road, that's really the foundation of a growth mindset. Is when you're in hypervigilance, everything is about what we call avoidance goals. So you're trying to not have things happen. Don't get abandoned, don't get rejected, don't get in a position where I'm powerless. So life is living it not to lose. It's not a living to win mentality. So if I scale those down to believable things, like this time next year, I will have half my credit card debt paid off, or I will read 2 books on your emotional relationship with money and try to implement 3 of those strategies. And I succeed in doing those because those are attainable goals that my brain can believe. The brain will start to rewire itself to give you dopamine just for challenging yourself, not for obtaining it, but just because you're willing to go after it. And then you start to develop a growth mindset, which have other videos I'm doing on that, but where you start to go for things. So it's an approach mentality, which is the opposite of what hypervigilance is doing. So this is also something that you can start to chip away at to shift some of my brain's orientation from avoidance goals to approach goals. Now the key here, this is the big meat and potatoes of this video I really want to share with you now. The key to really starting to rewire hypervigilance is a very specific type of gratitude practice. Now I know, don't turn the video off yet, your eyes might glaze over, you've heard about gratitude 100 times. I myself have never been able to keep a gratitude practice until I did it this way, more than 2 or 3 days tops, and it just felt like another miserable task to me that I was failing at. So that is not what I'm talking about. What this is based again in neuroscience and neurobiology, is if you take just a few things, it could be 3, 5, 10, however ambitious you feel. Don't get caught up in 10 or 5 is still too big, just start with 3. And what I want you to do with that is write down each of those things and then focus on one thing at a time. It's not about what you think, but it's about what you feel. Neuroplasticity is achieved through a felt sense in the body with focused attention. So what I want you to do is either think or visualize that thing that you just wrote down that you're grateful for. And then notice where I start to feel that in my body. And this is essential. You gotta feel it in your body. If you can't, or some other block, you can work on that in different ways. But let's say, I'm assuming that you can get a felt sense. Now I want you just to hold that felt sense for a minute or two, as long as you want to, but try to make it within at least that range. The neuroscience shows us that if you can do that for a minimum of 20 seconds, it starts to create neurological changes in your nervous system. Then go on to the next one and do the exact same thing until you finish that. Just keep doing those things. Now for me, again, on a practical level, I really want to come up with realistic things for my clients, or for you if you're watching this video. So if you start writing things down, like my wife, my kids, my dog, my career, like within a few days, you've run out of things to write about. And now you're just like trying to make stuff up, which again, your brain knows is what you're doing because it's you. So what I do is I look at moments and experiences, because I never run out of them. So then I might, when I was doing the preparation for this video, there was 3 things I thought about. I thought about 2 different moments with my kids, 1 with my wife, and then I used those to get that really felt level, especially using imagery. So when your brain sees images, whether it's out here from your retinal cells in your brain, and your eyes are actually an external part of the brain that I just found out a couple years ago, I didn't realize. Then you have retinal cells inside your brain, and that's how you see in your mind's eye, or movies or video games, but it's all the same to the body. So when you think about something that's super positive or super negative, you'll start to feel it in your body. Your hypervigilance validates what I'm saying, because you ruminate and think about all these negative things that could happen, and you feel all this tension and energy in your body and all this anxiety and adrenaline, cortisol. None of it's happening. Even if it could happen, it's not happening, and it's not happening right now, but my body doesn't know that. It's real to the body. So when we're talking about making this shift of you focusing on something positive, feel it in my body, sit with that, now the neuroplasticity is getting created. And then the research shows that within 3 weeks of this practice, you can start to tip the amygdala's negativity bias. The other thing that happens when you do this practice is you'll eventually get to a point where your brain will start to release oxytocin, which they call the love hormone or the bonding hormone, parent, child, husband, wife, lovers, deep friendships, endorphin release, and serotonin release. And so what'll happen, you'll start to get the subjective experience of feeling loved and safe. It'll trigger your vagal nerve, the ventral vagal aspect of the vagal nerve, and shut down your sympathetic nervous system. Now I can actually start to focus on those kind of things that I want to focus on, the approach goals, the things I want to acquire, which then puts those defense systems back. So then again, the amygdala is getting rewired, you're getting the neurochemicals and the neurological aspect of secure attachment, which makes you feel safe and loved. And these are things that you can practice. You don't have to go out there and take the risk right now of reaching for someone else, when that could be too big of a jump for where you are. The ultimate solution is you've got to clear this stuff out of your nervous system, out of those implicit memory networks that we talk about in almost every video. That is the key. But this is something that you can do on a daily basis. That's not a big, but just start to practice this until you start to get that felt level, the calmness, and you realize that you're not just doing some personal development thing that's like all hyped up, but you're actually creating neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain and nervous system. The last thing I want to talk about is there was a neuroscientist, Glenn Fox, that showed there was a correlation between gratitude and flow states. And again, I'm not going to get into the flow states. One of the things I'm most excited about in life is researching flow. But this is a state that unlocks your ultimate potential as a human being, whether it's performance, connection, spirituality, whatever that is. It's neurochemically, in addition to elevating performance, is a very pleasurable state. The psychologist Csikszentmihalyi is considered the godfather of flow. He started out researching human happiness. And then he came across this phenomenon that he ended up designating flow states, because that was the terminology the participants would tell him all the time. You know, whether it was connection, performance, it just seemed like it just flowed, time distorted, either really slow, like if I was connecting with someone for 3 hours, felt like 5 minutes. It was surfing a 60-foot wave. Everyone else, it looked like 10 seconds. For me, it felt like a minute and a half. Everything just slowed down. And there's this sense of oneness with everything. So when you're in chronic, again, hypervigilance, and you're stuck in that loop, right? Everything's about avoidance and all that loss that comes from the things I'm missing out on. So gratitude, in addition to shutting down your sympathetic nervous system, bringing up a subjective sense of feeling loved and safe, also can access more flow states for you. You can start achieving your potential and start developing more approach goals, getting more fulfillment, meaning, purpose, connection out of life, and not let trauma continue to take all these things away from you. So as always, I hope you found this video useful. You can leave comments. If you somebody in your life that you feel could benefit from this, please send it forward. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. You can reach us if you want more information about this, or if you'd like to talk to my wife, Bissan, or I, just hit us up at hawkinscounselingcenter.com. We'll be more than happy to talk to you.